Welcome back to Rise and Rouse, a conversation for those who give a damn. This is your host, Erin Allgood, social impact strategist, consultant, and creative entrepreneur. On the podcast today, you'll hear my conversation with Victoria Carrington Chavez, a celebrated storyteller, marketer, just an amazing, amazing human being who I'm so honored to be able to call my friend. This conversation is absolutely pure gold. We talk about letting go of perfectionism. We talk about stepping into your creative journey. There's just so much richness within this conversation. I think you'll truly enjoy it. So thank you for being here. Welcome back to Rise and Rouse. I am so excited to have Victoria Carrington Chavez here today to talk about all things creativity, all things running your own business, just all things equity related. We're going to just talk about everything. I think that's what's going to happen. You and I met through New Leaders Council New Hampshire, which shout out to them because so many of my guests have been from New Leaders Council New Hampshire over the years. And it's just like such a great place to find folks who are doing really cool, innovative, awesome work within the state. And so I am not even going to read your bio. I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you are the wordsmith here anyways. So I'll hand it to you to share a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I am super excited and maybe fangirling a little bit because Rise and Rouse was one of the first podcasts that I saw like a couple of years ago or like in season 1. And I was like, I want to be on there someday. So I am kind of living my best dream girl life right now. So thank you. And yes, shout out to New Leaders Council New Hampshire and just the space that felt really good to connect other community leaders and progressive leaders who really are making some awesome big positive ass waves in our state for like the greater good. So here for it. So as far as like who I am and my bio, my story, I was born, just kidding. But I do appreciate a good story. And like most people, I think my story is my favorite story. But I, in terms of work and what I do is I am an entrepreneur. I'm a storyteller. I am a creative director and visual artist. And I really believe in trying to live my best life. But I'm originally from Colorado, born and raised. And I am Afro-Indigenous, Dene, and Latina. And so I grew up in a multicultural home. And then I was raised in a predominantly white community in Boulder, Colorado. And so I got to kind of see a lot of different perspectives of life from early on. And that's really shaped me to like what I like to do now is just really hear people's stories because I've just been fascinated in all of the different ways that people express themselves, whether it be, there's so many creative means out there, but also just like what are people's cultures, like how people kind of got to where they're at today and just all the journeys that we go on. As far as my business, I have two. I have Lilac and Aspen, which is a nod to living in Colorado and New Hampshire. And then I am currently working on my second brand, which is La Mezcla Creative Co. And we can talk more about that and equity and some of the offerings of being able to take the years of content creation and social media know-how and Canva and how I can start to create. I've been creating some courses as offerings for community.
Oh, I'm so excited to hear more about it because I feel like I obviously know Lilac and Aspen and I don't know La Mezcla as well as I would like right now. So I'm excited to dive into that. And it took me so long. I hate to admit this, but it took me so long to figure out Lilac and Aspen. And then I was like, oh, that's what that is. I felt very dorky when I figured it out.
It's not super obvious, and I totally get it. And I mean, that is something I love a good word pun. And so as far as like creativity, like I mentioned, I'm a visual artist. Like I started out, I loved drawing and painting when I was a kid. second grade art show champion, in the state of Minnesota at the time. But I also loved writing. I had won some awards when I was young too for writing. And that's kind of been the like hidden thing. And so it's been really interesting to see all the different creative spaces come back up. And actually, it's kind of funny because Lilac and Aspen started years and years ago when I first lived in New Hampshire about a decade ago. And it was my art business because I was like going to art markets and I was selling some of my paintings and selling photography services. And I just remember sitting there not knowing how to name my business. And it was in the spring, the windows were open and I got to smell the lilacs. And I was like, Lilac and Aspen, that just sounds like a fun art market name. So when I launched my marketing agency, I was like, I'll just go with this. I've been using this for a while under the radar, which I was glad to finally make it legit and get the paperwork. So, which if you're a new entrepreneur, you should do that. And there are so many great business resources like CWE,
Yep,
Center for Women and Entrepreneurship. I really feel like
enterprise.
enterprise.
Yep. So Victoria is works part-time with Center for Women in Enterprise. I am a consultant. I've worked with them for years, literally probably 6+ years at this point. I can remember I was still actually married at that time, to my first husband. So that's how I mark time. Sometimes it's the before and after.
Yes.
So big shout out to Center for Women in Enterprise. We'll link that in the show notes. So if you are somebody who is local to, there's 4 different states, New England states that have the CWE. Otherwise, go to your state's Women's Business Center. Hugely helpful. I hear from people all the time how much they love the services. It's amazing. And I'm so glad you're part of that too.
Yeah, because it's important. And also being a creative, and that's what we can kind of talk about, because running a creative business, running a creative heart-centered based business, the rules are so different. I'm much more intuitive in my business. I'm much more intentional in my business. I'm really focused. I have to make sure that there's space for, the creative exploration and creative expression. And so having a space that allowed me the freedom to write a business plan or something that was really open for that was so instrumental. And because I know how to create, that doesn't necessarily mean that so spreadsheets are not my favorite thing. I will tell you. And there are just some times in your business you're going to have to deal with a fucking spreadsheet. And so you just kind of find that balance and that equilibrium. So it's been great to participate in that community resource as well, as we're talking about equity and things that are really helpful for community, because a lot of the resources out there that CWE offers are free. And there are other resource partners as well offering these free resources to help people kind of live their best lives.
Right. And I think what you're also saying here too, just to lift up one of these points, is just, you don't have to be good at everything in your business. There are other people there to help you learn whatever skills you need. But that was one thing I remember saying this to a friend of mine at one point, was just you don't have to do it all alone. You can ask people for help. And I think a lot of business owners, especially women business owners or femme business owners, queer business owners, we're all just so conditioned to doing shit ourselves because things are not set up in a way for us to succeed. And so we're kind of well, I have to be innately good at this thing in order to do it, right? Anyways, I've heard so many people beat themselves up about it, about not being good at spreadsheets or whatever. And you don't have to be. There's places that CWE can help you.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, because I think for me, in some of my journey is that I'm a recovering perfectionist. I struggled very hard with perfectionism. And part of that, I give myself a little bit of gentle grace with, of I am a woman of color. And at times there were consequences that were really much more intense when I would make mistakes. Or, I still remember having like a high school art teacher basically tell me that I needed to pick a different career, that my art wasn't good enough. And like, and I look back and I'm like, whoa, like I'm, basically like my art was good enough. But then she's like telling other kids, she's giving a different tone to others. And so I learned really early on, unfortunately, that to be liked, to be accepted, I needed to be perfect. And that is one, a huge setup for failure. And two, I think that asking for help, we're just not conditioned, like you said, and especially in a femme-bodied space of like, we kind of like are to fix things, to take care of things, to, put the weight of the world on our shoulders. And it's exhausting. And people have asked me, what's one of the biggest things that has helped your success? And I'm like, community, support, asking for help, not doing it alone. And it's really counterintuitive, but it's so vital. We also have a society of comparison. I remember when I was like growing up, my dad used to be like, oh, there's only like, there can only be one Latina that's nominated for the Academy, or there can only be one Black woman that's nominated for the Academy. And so we have this system of like tokenizing and picking kind of one person of color to amplify. And yes, we're like slowly moving away from that, but then you throw that in with like these intense consequences, and you're just setting up the scene for us having this scarcity mindset, fighting for resources, not collaborating and competing instead, and then wondering why we're struggling or we're unhappy or we're just disconnected.
Oh yeah. Yep. So disconnected. That's like the story of our lives, I feel like right now.
and that was a lot of like, some of my work life. And it wasn't necessarily, I think, malintentioned, but I definitely was that person that would feel like I would have to work extra hard to prove myself, to prove that I was good enough or that I deserved the job or that I was worthy enough. And, it's like I've sat in meetings before and I've been, director of communications, and I've had my communications and my decisions questioned when I haven't seen those things happen to my like white male counterparts. Yeah. And it's really frustrating. Honestly, it's really infuriating. And then on top of that, like, people joke that I'm an age vampire, that I don't look like I'm 40, which is, it's like, okay, so you think that I'm young, you think that, and you're like, oh, this is like a woman. And like, does she really know? And I've had that happen a lot sometimes early on in my career when I started communications years ago. People are like, you're so good at communications. I was like, it helps that I got a communications degree, y'all.
Right. Right.
Like I'm not making this up. I actually went to school for communications.
My God. It's so funny to me. And I've heard that from other people too, who are like, I mean, for me, one of the big things that I see is like, I step into spaces that are sometimes with like older white men, not very often, but like I do occasionally. And they don't always take me as seriously. And I have to fight against that all the time. I'm like, I'm not that young. Like, it's not like I'm all that young of a person, but they perceive me as younger than I am. And then being a woman on top of all of that, like having to fight for that, for my own kind of credibility. And I'm like, I oftentimes do not waste the time in those spaces because it is like, it's exhausting. Like you said, it's infuriating and it is exhausting. And then on top of all of that too, it's just, I just can't. But I will say I have been pleasantly surprised the last couple of times that I have entered into some of those spaces. And so that's why I do keep stepping in gingerly.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's important that you go where you're celebrated. And I think that that's a beautiful thing about my upbringing. And while there were challenges, like not necessarily growing up in a diverse community, it definitely taught me how to navigate being in a space where I am not the majority, and to kind of find the people who are, to like really call out and see, or not call out like in a bad way, but just really identify allyship. So identify people like, hey, Erin, like, like you're a white lady, like, you got me, like you can go have a conversation. You can, I don't always have to educate, and like what that allyship really can look like. And I love that, and I appreciate that so much, because that has also been key, is seeing it from a lot of different perspectives. Because here's the deal, like, we're messy as humans, we are complex, we don't fit in a box. That was
Right.
what my TED Talk was about, was not fitting in a box. And we're so layered, and we have these multitudes. And I think that the more that we allow kind of this space for creative expression, the more that we allow space for just expression in general, and accept and be okay with like the gray, like, we can really see some really vibrant things blossom, including the people that are working with us. I sometimes think about my work, and I don't always use this word, like, but in a way it's decolonization. It's looking at it from a different lens. It's looking at it from not the typical colonized lens, because I collaborate with people. I don't want to compete with people. I want to uplift people. And I've had to make adjustments even in various pricings, but I want my offerings to be accessible, and I want people to feel like they can access, quality services. I work with people to the best of my ability. And then I'm now shifting into like moving into creating courses. And so that people can access that information still, and kind of have different type of price point options, because those things are really important to me. And especially from this lens of, I was talking to someone earlier about, BIPOC and queer communities, being able to really own our stories and getting those platforms. And I forget his name, and I apologize, but he's the director of Dear White People. And he has such a beautiful like TikTok. Like, I watch his TikToks all the time, where he's talking about this, why it's so important to him is to be able to share stories authentically and then encourage others to do so. And he's somebody who talks about his own struggles in Hollywood, his own struggles of getting his projects and his movies made, because people were like, oh, we want Black stories, but we don't want Black people to do them. And that, like, like, we know, right? And so that's a lot of what I want, the essence of what I want to bring with like marketing and or content creation that lends itself to marketing and branding, is like helping BIPOC people share their stories authentically, but giving them the autonomy, the power, the tools, and the resources to do so.
Yep. That's the way that it should be. And I'm so glad you're doing it. Like, yes. I'm so glad you're finding that like niche. And I would love it if you feel comfortable like diving more into like the decolonized lens and like how that shows up in your work. And if you're like, that's not a fully, that's, if it's not the right time for that, that's okay too.
So that is a great question, Erin. And to answer your question, just kind of about decolonization, is that stories have been inherently Indigenous and just a part of our existence since the beginning. And we use stories to teach lessons, we use stories to connect, we use stories to identify, and really just kind of find like a home, like what are myths and legends and things that we hear, but really great stories, from, Greek stories to the Indigenous myths and creation stories that we hear. There's so much out there that I think people can really gain from. And so in terms of decolonizing and the work that I do, is that I help people connect to what their story is, or what their kind of power place can be, and kind of really sifting through all the things that sometimes get in the way of our own story. So part of my story is, and I talked about this at TEDx, is that I used to straighten my hair. And I know it's a podcast, so I have to kind of describe my hair, but I have this really thick, long, curly hair. And most of the time people will comment on it. I've been told I have really beautiful hair. It's a signature thing. And so when I think about, and even on the TEDx stage, I talked about how I straightened it, and people were like, oh, no. But at the same time, when I would straighten it, people would be like, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. Like, you should do, like suddenly I had hit this like different level of beauty standard, because I was assimilating and not being within my natural hair. So I really help people find that space of who they were and who they are before the world told them this is what they need to be or how they need to move to be accepted, and use that in their business, and use that in their brand. And even if or if they're already there, like I have some friends who are already like, nope, I know who I am. I'm out, I'm loud, and I'm proud. Then we kind of weave things together and really kind of see how they all can kind of sync and fit together. I had a client once comment, because I'm Danae, and they said, you weave stories like the Danae weaves blankets. And I cried. I was just like, oh my gosh.
God.
Like, I was like, I can't, this is one of the most beautiful compliments I've ever gotten. But I just love this idea of that it's not just finding out your power, your strength in your story, but then weaving it through all the other aspects of your your business, your personal life, the things that make you you, and the things that make you great. Because a lot of times, especially if we're people who stories don't fit in the typical mold, we're just not sure where we fit. And it's because we weren't supposed to. So having that guidance to weave is to me really decolonizing. The beautiful part is that you get to be the narrator in your own story, and you get to have autonomy with that. And you get to not have to explain who you are. You get to just be who you are.
Oh my God, that's so beautifully put. Because think about how much effort that can go into trying to present yourself to the world. It can be so exhausting when you don't fit the mold that everybody is trying to assign to you. And so being able to give people that gift of being able to just be themselves and have the autonomy over their own story is huge.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like when I say things like authentic storytelling, there's a lot of different layers of that, you know, in terms of like authenticity can be vulnerable. Authenticity can also be about real. But I also recognize that there are a number of systemic things happening that makes it very hard for people to own their authenticity and own their story, especially at a public level. And we cannot deny those things. We can't hide from those things. There are people who unfortunately can suffer really grave consequences, truly. And it can be a life or death. There's a reason that closets and masks exist in our culture and in our, society. And because there is that sense of safety. But if you are somebody who is like, I can't be in the closet anymore because it's killing me to be in here mentally and spiritually, and how do I then kind of come out, be more honest, be more real? And then that way, the beautiful thing is that when you do that more, it also attracts your squad, the people that are going to align with you, the people that are going to cheerlead with you, the people that see you and celebrate you. Much like earlier in the episode, like go to spaces where you're celebrated, and also go to spaces where you're seen, because we're beyond safe spaces. Like it's 2024. Like we know a safe space is a bare minimum. We don't need any more safe spaces. We need seen spaces. We need spaces where people can show up, be themselves, and be loved, accepted, celebrated, appreciated for who they are, instead of trying to fit them into boxes. But I think to even take it a little deeper and like seen, because like the scene is like seen for who you are, and who you want to be. Because that's the other piece, is like I get seen all the time. I think too, being culturally ambiguous in the ways that I am, because I travel the world, and people generally ask me where I'm from, what am I, where am I really from, where are my parents from? Like they're like, not everybody's ready for a history dissertation. But I think it's because people see me, but they're like trying to place me. And, that's something that we've just kind of been trained as a society to do. So then what do you do when you can't place somebody? Then you're really forced to see them beyond what you think or what you think you might know. And that's the beautiful gift and the things that I tried, that I do my best to kind of offer. Because then we get to go to this like gray area that isn't necessarily black or white. It's kind of like, I always say that the gray is not gray. It's actually where the vibrancy in the rainbows lives, because it's in the in-between, because it's not good or bad. It's just kind of in that magical middle.
You said it earlier before too, like that's where things go to bloom or they go to grow. And I was just like, that is a beautiful way to talk about the gray.
Yeah. because that's something that I've accepted and that I see, and my strength is to exist in a space of dualities. One space that I see come up is I like hiking. I like to be outdoors. And, people like I've heard that, well, Black people don't go outside or Black people don't hike. And I'm like, well, I grew up next to the mountains. Like I grew up in Boulder. Like it's literally next to the mountains. And so I can be a woman of color who loves hiking just as much as I can be a Latina who really loves spicy food. Like I can be what feels the traditional or the stereotypical, but then I can also be this completely outside the box. And I think that that's that part of the gray area of like, it's not this or that. It can be both and that's what I really, shared in my TED talk. And so kind of shifting to that space of storytelling, I got up there and I shared my heart and I was really like vulnerable. I was really honest. I was really scared. But I think that that's the beauty of when we are being our authentic selves, that we lose shame, we lose guilt. We realize that I did it because I wanted other people to feel like they weren't alone with whatever they were carrying or whatever they were going through. And I've had so many people and heard so many beautiful stories of people who've resonated. And the irony is that it's not even just racially, like it's across the board, a lot of different identities, a lot of different backgrounds who are like, I didn't feel like I fit in a box either, Victoria. And it's because we're not supposed to be. Like we as humans are meant to walk between multiple worlds. That is like the magic of it. And I feel like society, in terms of a colonized society, says this is who you are, because that was colonization, right? We're going to come here. This is how you're going to behave. This is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to pray. This is who you're going to pray to. This is like, and decolonizing allows space for expression and expansion beyond that, beyond what one person says can work. Because what works for me might not work for you. And being open to that is how we kind of start to create a greater connection.
Yes, absolutely. There was a talk that I gave like years and years ago now. It was in January when my ex and I decided to get divorced. And like I gave this talk in February. Like, it was like January 20th. This was like February 2nd. So I was like a hot mess of an individual. But I think those of us who've gone through that kind of like big, heart-wrenching changes, those are sometimes like when we're at our like rawest and also most like truest in some ways. And I remember saying something about to this group of people, and I was just like, I think our job is to be ineffable, like stop allowing yourself to be defined by other people, by society, by anything, and just like become ineffable. Who fucking cares? And I'm like, it's a fun word to say anyways too. It's like, just like start to embody that shit, which is exactly the essence of like your TEDx talk was just all about that. Like, and it just was, I mean, I cried, I cheered, I like, oh my God, I laughed. It was a whole journey that you took everybody on, because that's what your storytelling does too, is it takes people on this journey and taps into this like real innate truths. It makes people like look at themselves more deeply too. It's like you're helping to tell other people's stories, but you also are helping people see themselves in a new light. And that is wild and amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love that you use the word wild. I mean, so in kind of this, like some of the things that I'm up to in the coming year is that I've been writing a book for over a decade, and it's my memoirs. And so far it's called Wildly Thee. And it just talks about, this wild self-love, this expression of self-love, because you're right. Like that's loving yourself is owning your story, the bullshit and all. Like we all have shit we've been through. We've all been through various heartbreaks. We've all been through pain. And we all have these things that we feel shame and guilt about. And then, depending on, how we show up in society, it might be compounded. But the more that we distill and get down to like the shit that makes us human, the shit that is really raw and real, which is what authentic storytelling is about, the more we can create that space for connection. because when I was like on the stage, like people weren't seeing me. When I told that story of being a little girl and being sent to the principal's office because I was multicultural, and they literally couldn't check me in a box, and they were like, "You can't go to school until we figure out what box to put you in." And hearing the audience like gasp and be like, "Whoa, no!" Like just kind of, and it was really powerful because afterwards I had a number of moms come up to me crying, and it was like for a minute, like everybody in that room was like my mom and just being like, no, you cannot, don't put baby in the corner. We're not doing that. But I really believe that's so powerful to help people own their stories and, like you said, become unfuckable with and become unstoppable. That's like the whole point of my memoir, is like telling all of these, a lot of heartbreak stories, but how I got to this point of being able to be like, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I'm just kind of learning to deeply, wildly love myself, to just be, madly in love with myself, that I felt worthy and deserving to chase the life of my wildest dreams, which now like I live, I travel around the world. I have like 2 businesses. I, gave a TED talk, like all of those things. I wouldn't have done those things years ago if I didn't love myself and accept myself. And, RuPaul talks a lot about that. Like, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else? And so it does feel really wild. And I think that that's why I call it that, because there is this term of, to rewild is to reconnect to who you were before the world told you who they thought you should be.
Yeah.
And that journey is hard, Erin, but it's so worth it. Like, that's how you get unfuckable. Like, where you're just like, nobody, that's where you become unstoppable.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that this is maybe the tagline for today, is like, no more fucks to give, you are unstoppable, or something.
Yeah.
Can you please make that like a subtitle for you'll make it sound better than that, but
subtitle. Well, there's this thing on LinkedIn, and so it's really interesting, and in terms of stories and connection, and like, so I met this woman on LinkedIn, and she is a business coach, and every year she participates in something called the Race Reparations, and she gives free coaching to BIPOC businesses. In particular, she wants to give precedent to Black women. And so she's pledges X amount of hours that she's somebody who works with like 7-figure, company. Like and so I got one of the spots, and she was really lovely and gave me some business advice that is super pivotal in the launches that I'm coming up with in the next couple months. And one day she was like, hey, I'm going to be in New Hampshire. And so we met for coffee. And something that she talks about in posts on LinkedIn that has made her business successful is the don't give a fuck attitude. And we had this really beautiful coffee. Her name is Nora. One of her brands is Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And we had this coffee, and we just talked about how we related in these years of being in marketing, in comms, being ignored, not having our stories validated or supported, that we both have kind of gone on and made these like marketing agencies, and now we just don't give a fuck. And like, actually, like, there's a little like, she tagged me in a post where she was like, this is my don't give a fuck face. And then she even made a joke where she was like, this is also my New England face. And I was like, oh, I can relate to that, because I'll tell you, Erin, living in New England, people are like, Victoria, you don't seem like you're from New England. You smile too much. Like, I've actually had to practice with my best friend. My best friend has had to teach me RBF. My best friend, Genevieve from New England, has to teach me RBF, because but it's been one of the greatest things to like learn RBF, learn New England mean face, because then it just kind of feeds into the don't give a fuck. But you would think that her posting something like that wouldn't help her business. But if anything, it's made her business boom. It's helped put her in partnership with people like me, other people across the country who are doing work that is equitable, right? Because like, she's giving out these, for race reparations, giving out coaching, and really just making a change for the greater good. And also, it's just fun.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I'm so happy. Like, we should link her in the show notes too, if we can, because I think that would be for other folks, because, you know, my readership or listenership or whatever we call it, my amazing listeners come from all sorts of backgrounds too. So if there's other folks who want to start following her, it would be amazing. But I think it like speaks to just how you are so constantly like expanding your circles and bringing new folks into your orbit and finding new orbits to travel. It's really inspiring to just see how that has grown and evolved also over time, over a very short period of time. It feels like
the year. Yeah, it feels like a short time, but I think that part of, you know, in kind of wrapping up is that what started changing was that I just started using my voice. I just started using my real voice. I stopped pretending to be what I thought people would want me to be. I let go of being a perfectionist. I let go of trying to give the answer that I thought people would want to hear so that they would like me, because I learned to love myself. And then I just felt really catapulted. Like, it does feel very overnight, but in like the last year, the transformation, the change, everything has been really wild, for lack of a better word, which is probably why I go with that, because it feels, but it doesn't take long once we start really stepping into our power, stepping into our purpose, and really using our voice. And then it's kind of like this call for other people. And I work with some really amazing people. My business cartographer, who is somebody who helps, kind of map out systems of success, has been really helping me make business. Like, she's constantly reminding me, and I can put her name in the show notes too.
Yeah.
She's constantly reminding me, she's like, Victoria, it's your business. You get to make it how you want. Like, especially like on the back end, right? Because I'll be like, oh, I have to like do this on Monday. And she's like, says who? So a Monday is like an admin day where I'm just like, kind of, that's the day I'm answering emails. That's the day I'm doing my calendar. That's the day I'm journaling and deciding what is my intention for this week. I'm really putting myself, like, I start my week putting me first and filling my cup, so then I can go through the rest of the week completing all the other tasks. And it took me months to like feel comfortable in taking that space, because there were some other things kind of happening. But every week, Erin, that I have started Monday with filling my cup first, not putting client meetings on the calendar if I can avoid it, and just giving myself that full Monday workday, I have done twice as much work throughout the week. I've had amazing weeks. I've had such transformation. And, I really needed that permission, but also the support and the structure to kind of forge my own path. And it just really speaks to this self-love thing, because we're not taught that. Erin, like, I've spent a year like really trying to focus on like, how do I put myself first, which feels so counterintuitive, but I will tell you, putting myself first has changed my life.
Yeah. I needed to hear that so badly. Myself, because I'm just like, we were talking today on a Monday, and I'm just like, I'm frazzled already. And I'm like, fuck, this week's going to be long. And so I'm like, I'm so happy to hear you say that, and that you've owned that and made that happen, because it's amazing.
Yeah. And
you were amazing.
You're amazing. And it's a process, and I have to use my RBF that I learned. I have to set my boundaries. I have to say, and I have to really tap into a different space, and, recovering from people pleasing, from, because that's the other piece, is like, when you love yourself unapologetically, you're going to upset people. This is the way of it. And, I had to let go of people pleasing. I had to let go of perfectionism. And but like, by letting go of those things, you get to kind of have something new and beautiful. It's much like, I'm sure someone else, it's the Marie Kondo. I think it was the lady that like in 2020 was like, doesn't spark joy, get rid of it.
Right. Yeah.
Which that's kind of what Virgo season feels like right now.
Yes.
Like, doesn't spark joy, get rid of it. And like doing that evaluation within your own life of like, okay, does this spark joy? Because then the whole point of that was, she was like, now you've let go of these things that don't spark joy. Now you have space for joy. That was the whole point.
Yeah.
So we can do this in our business. We can do this in our lives. We can do this in our story. And just continue to want to be this light, this beacon that can encourage other people to do the same, but support them, see them, cheerlead them along the journey, because it's not easy, but it's so worth it. And the more of us that don't fit in the box, that thrive in the gray, that blossom and bloom and become these vibrant, badass, beautiful butterflies. I don't know why I'm feeling butterflies right now. Maybe they're really transformative. I'm wearing like a butterfly ring. Then suddenly those boxes, those two sides, it all blends together anyway, which is what la mezcla means, the mix.
Yeah.
It all mixes, it all blends together. And you are a painter as well, Erin, a very talented painter.
Oh, thank you.
And you know the power and the magic that comes when you blend things together to create something new and beautiful. And that's what I hope to do in the work that I do, both professionally and personally, and how I show up to the best of my ability.
Oh my goodness. And you do in so many ways. And it's also, I recognize that for all of us, as we've all these intentions, that is always a work in progress too. We're always, the work and the cultivation never ends.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here. And I'm so excited to be able to introduce all of my Rise and Rouse followers to who you are. This is absolutely beautiful. And anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah. I mean, first off, thank you so much. I love this. Like I said at the beginning, living my best life, living out a dream, because I did. And it's interesting as I talked about this transformative journey, but you were somebody that I saw that was speaking your truth unapologetically. And when I first met you a couple of years ago, I was like, I want to be that. And so to now be that feels really full circle and magical. So thank you for having me on your show and giving me a platform to just kind of speak more of my truth. And I'm just, really excited in terms of some of the business launches that I'm launching some courses in the fall. So stay tuned, follow me on LinkedIn, Victoria Carrington Chavez. I got big hair from the greater Boston area. Check out the Canva courses that I'm launching, some other courses in terms of helping people with content creation and helping people find their power in their story. And what else? Oh, and please watch my TED Talk about embracing, my multicultural identity. And the last thing that I'll say is, go and embrace each other. That sounded strange, but you know what I mean, guys. And just be kind. I mean, we have it's a heavy world right now. And I think that the more that we celebrate each other and see each other in authentic, meaningful ways, the more hopes that we can put back into this world.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.